Welcome to the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews, presented by IV Creative. Now, here's your hosts, B. Cox and the crew.
Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews, presented by IV Creative. It's a perspective of the classics from a fresh point of view. Appreciate you for taking your time and lending your ears to our perspective. You could be anywhere listening to anything, but you're right here with us, so we thank you. With you today is yours truly, B. Cox, and I do have a co-pilot. My boy J.O. is back in the building. Jason Owens back in the building to come chop it up with us again. Jay, welcome back, man.
It's good, man. Glad to be back.
Yeah. So we are here to co-pilot this journey along with us. Rest of the crew is still out, and hopefully we'll have them back soon, but we're going to chop it up over one of the classics, as we always chop it up over the classics. Hashtag open the vault, hashtag MBTC for nothing but the classics. And as always, we like to take you back in time, and today we go back to the year 2000 to Dead Prez. Let's Get Free. Dead Prez, the rap duo, met originally in Tallahassee, Florida at Florida A&M University. This is where Stickman and M1, the two members of Dead Prez, met. Had a similar love of music, similar political ideology, and of course, if you listen to this music, it's different. It's an album that you got to listen to, and you have to be in a certain mind state to be able to receive the messages that are in there, and sort of have to be able to enjoy it, because if you're not, then it may not be your cup of tea.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. This came out 20 years ago now, released 20 years ago on February 8th, 2000. Actually, coincidentally, our last album reviewed in episode 20, Ghostface Killah Supreme Clientele, both of these albums were released on the same exact day. As it happened so many different times, you had that release date on Tuesdays, and sometimes you had things rolled out. It would happen that you would have your album released on the same day, possibly of an album that could overshadow yours. And in some cases, that's probably what happened. Nonetheless, this is a project that caught a lot of eyes and turned some heads because of the content in it, and of course because of Dead Prez themselves and their messages that they gave. As we said, released February 8, 2000, recorded between 98 and 2000, a runtime of 69 minutes and 30 seconds on Loud Records. And I stop and think about Loud Records, thinking about the roster that was on Loud in the 90s into the 2000s, from Wu-Tang to Raekwon to Mobb Deep, Pun, Dead Prez. And honestly, you got to give Steve Rifkin, who was the CEO or executive over at Loud Records, being able to procure so much great hip hop talent.
Absolutely.
And being able to continuously put out projects for those artists and keep that label going. And they really were in that sense, Loud really was, part of that core group of labels that made hip hop its foundation. Yeah. And when you see that Loud logo and that symbol of those headphones, you knew exactly what kind of hip hop you were going to be getting.
You knew what time it was.
Exactly. Indeed. So 69 minutes and 30 seconds, and producers on this, mostly Dead Prez, Head Rush, and there was also production on here by Kanye West and also by Lord Jamar. Now, the story behind this as well about Dead Prez is that they were discovered by Lord Jamar in New York City, and Lord Jamar was instrumental in getting them to sign a deal with Loud Records. So he took some creative part in this and being able to produce some of the tracks on this as well, and being as though that you look at Dead Prez and who they're sort of symboled after, of Brand Nubian being one of those groups that you could think about that they sort of pattern their style after. It would make sense that he would be the person or someone that would take interest in a group like Dead Prez and helping them get out there in the industry. A large part of this album was produced by those names that we just mentioned, and we'll get into this album. It's been 20 years now. Stickman, or Stick as he more is commonly known, M1, definitely had a message that they were spreading in here. Like I said, you have to be in a certain mode to be able to digest this album because it's heavy stuff, the type of stuff they're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just not some, I would even say it's above just like, just vibing on some lyrical content. Because people listen like things to lyrical content, but this is deeper than that, in my opinion.
It is.
You know what I mean? So like you just had to be really in that mind frame as far as like the messages they were conveying, and just like really take it in as far as like, how it's applicable to your life. And which is, in my case, I've definitely come to appreciate now that I'm older. So yeah, I mean, unless you were blessed to have like that elevated type of mindset back then, like a lot of it probably will go over your head. So
yeah, it is. And just to give some perspective, 20 years ago when this album came out, I was in high school. I was getting ready to graduate from high school that year. This came out, like I said, at a critical time where a few albums came out that grabbed my attention at that age. The way I found out about this album was I had a history teacher in my school, a Bowie High School. We'll just call him Mr. J. All right. Mr. J was prototypical emancipate yourself from mental slavery, black empowerment, black man teacher in a high school that at that time in a community where it was mostly white. But he was this tall black guy, glasses, dreadlocks down his back, very, very intelligent. And he was a teacher that also was with my African-American studies teacher at that time. When in the second semester of my senior year, I took an African-American studies class. Okay. He had that period open, so a lot of times he would come in and sort of co-teach that class with us. So in my senior year, there's a lot of juniors and seniors. The majority of us are black. There was one white dude in the class, and ironically enough, he was a exchange student who was finishing high school in the United States, and he was originally from, I believe he was from Croatia.
Oh, culture shock.
Yeah, but he knew a lot about black. He knew some stuff about black culture, but said he wanted to take that class because he wanted to understand black people better. But to go back to the subject, Mr. J was this dude. He used to always drop gems on us. And the way you could always tell when he would drop gems on us, he'd always be like, he would drop this same phrase to preface. Yeah, hey, yo, check this out. Check this out. So he was originally from New York. He was from Brooklyn. So he was like, every time he was about to drop a gem on us about something, he'd be like, hey, yo, check this out. Check this out. Like he was an MC getting ready to drop a freestyle. But he would always talk to us about stuff when it came to stuff like Egyptology, things about the Egyptians, about West African. That's the first time that I actually learned in depth about Mansa Musa and the kingdoms of Mali and Ghana and what was Sierra Leone and Benin and Togo. He got very involved in those type of things. He's the one who put me onto this album at first. Okay. And he said, Joe, you need to check out this album by Dead Prez. He said, your young minds may not be ready to process what they telling you. He said, but you need to check this album out by Dead Prez, B, word up. He said, I'm telling you, and so I remember he actually gave me this CD to listen to. He said, yo, I want you to go to your room, listen to this, plug it into your stereo, and put your headphones on.
My man was dedicated.
He said, I want you to listen to this, put it in your headphones. We used to talk about hip hop a lot. And he was like, when we started talking about hip hop, his ears sort of perked up. And he'd be like, nah, man, I'm about to drop something on y'all right now. He put me on to a lot of music. Not only did he put me on to this, he's the one who first time he heard Comments Like Water for Chocolate. He's the one who put me on to Emile LaRue's debut album. So he put me on to a lot of music. Yeah. So I went home and listened to this, and I was intrigued by what I heard. My 18-year-old mind had sort of opened up to some things, and it was a lot of the things that he was saying as well. As time went on, this album sort of shifted from my consciousness and into the back of my mind until I got to college. And then when I got to Morgan my freshman year, I had people around me that were playing this album, and things started to resonate even more. Hence, you get to an historically black college and university, you start running into those subset of students that are very conscious, very Pan-Africanist, very Afrocentric, and you start hearing this music even more and more. Then you start seeing things later on as you get into college. You see someone like Dave Chappelle start to have an interest because you hear this song every time he starts Chappelle's show. It's bigger than hip hop, hip hop. So that every time he starts this show with that, and when you start to get into it and you start learning things, especially at a school like a black college, you start hearing this unconventional education that you don't learn during grade school that they don't want you to know, and start learning these concepts about self-empowerment and Pan-Africanism and self-reliance, and also things about socialism and Marxism and different political philosophies that they don't teach you in high school.
Right, like that whole album was really just like a class in itself. For
real, it was. So that's where it was then. Listening to it now, I'm listening to it and I'm like, damn, he's still talking about a lot of the same shit that we talking about today.
Right, 20 years ago, like 20 years later, I mean.
Yeah, so we talked last year about Most Steps, Black on Both Sides. Right. And we talked about how so many of that album was ahead of its time because now so many of those things still apply today. Mm-hmm. It's the same exact thing with this album. When you start hearing about the prison industrial complex, about the lack of education, how the school to prisons pipeline sort of builds up, about a lot of different things that you hear about it. You hear Garveyisms in here. You see Marxism stuffs in here. You see stuff about the Panthers and Huey Newton and Fred Hampton. Right. A lot of different things, man. So as a 38-year-old man listening to this now, it's even more prevalent to me seeing the things that happens in society that they was talking about 20 years ago. But your perspective, 20 years when you first heard it, and now listening to it now as a grown man, like how if anything has changed for you at all.
Okay, so yeah, like when the album actually dropped, I was actually my second semester at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania. But like the first time I heard like the track "It's Bigger Than Hip Hop," I was actually my senior year of high school, because I guess like they released that before the album came out, and it was actually on 88.1. It was a station in College Park. They had like an underground station, and so they played this right after Nas' New York State of Mind. Now I'm already just like mesmerized by that track, as far as like New York State of Mind 2 for the I Am album.
Yeah.
So like I was just mesmerized at Primo's production and how much darker it got. So then they played this right after that. I was like, whoa, what is this? Like the way the beat was constructed was different. And after that, I can't recall if the video came out for that or before the album, but even the way the video started off, it just shows you like this thick chick running down the street, and it was like, okay, now we got your attention. It's bigger than hip hop. Like, so, but then when the album actually dropped, and I just remember like, I didn't actually cop the album back then. And I think about that date it was released. You know, I think it was probably maybe like the day after, or day before Pump Pass. So like maybe right after Pump Pass.
Right after Pump Pass, exactly.
Heard some tracks off of it. Again, I didn't copy it for myself, so pretty much whenever somebody have it, I listen to it, and like, I was like, okay, you know, a lot of educational things, everything there. So I'm in college, and okay, I'm trying to make the best of my situation as far as like those opportunities. But I'm not gonna say it didn't resonate with me, because I was always like pro-black and like, you know, black empowerment and everything like that. But like now that it's 20 years later, I'm in my late 30s, and you know, so many things have happened in the course of life, as far as like, you know, just like experiences and dealing with like situations with other people, and especially like being a parent, like as far as like the school system. So like the joint about their schools, I mean, that track really resonated with me now, because like, you know, one thing I'm looking at for is like a quality education for my children, and you know, just like, okay, wow, this is going like 20 years ago, and then basically just things about, you know, just us really focusing, because the album was ahead of its time, but I would think now it's like even more critically important.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, like especially like where we are as black people in this country now. I mean, it kind of makes me think about the Chris Rock thing. It was like the whole thing about black people versus niggas.
Yeah,
he didn't say it during the course of the joke, but like, of course, you know, that interview started so much controversy. He was like, another difference is black people want things to get better. Niggas think things are great now. So, I mean,
that's a great point.
So like, you know what I mean? Like, so to hear that, and like, okay, I mean, and kind of irked me. Somebody brought up this point like before, like, you know, to act like we so better off, like, okay, all not slaves. I'm like, okay, yeah, we ain't got slavery now, but we still have issues, even post Jim Crow, that, you know, we still got to deal with. We still got to deal with like unequal education, police brutality, you know what I mean, like crime in the hood, still drug problems. I mean, it was crazy, I would say 25 years ago, but it's still a problem, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to listen to it now, like with the older mindset, I mean, I even kind of question if the album would even be released now, like this in the same fact, you know what I mean? Like it probably like almost like, you probably almost have to cop it, like you copping like a 8-ball or something on the street, because
you got that Dead Prez, yo.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Got
like,
got that DP for the low right here.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah, like I mean, for like, I mean, not to be like on like a conspiracy theorist type thing, but like all the messages as far as black empowerment, I think it takes me back like the things like Dr. King and Malcolm X were talking about, and how it riled so many people up, and people didn't want them speaking. So I really couldn't even process like, y'all were able to go into the studio and record this and actually put it out to the public. Like, I mean, yeah, back then, not to say things weren't going on back then, but I think we can all agree in the course of 20 years, a lot of stuff has come down the pipe as far as like inequality for black folks.
Exactly.
And, you know, like the George Zimmerman assholes of the world and everything like that. I mean,
yeah,
just like those things, and to be talking against that and like, look, we're not going to take this anymore. I just couldn't, it's just hard for me to even fathom like there wouldn't be pieces in power or powers that be that we even let them record this album. So
yeah,
I mean, it just makes me question my thing. Like, did we really have much freedom back then as opposed to now?
To now.
Like, yeah, it's crazy. I mean,
it's almost like if they were to do this album now, it would have to get crowdfunded by the people,
right?
Who would want it? It have to be distributed independently now. And now it's something like this. If they didn't want to go to a label like Loud, like say if Loud wasn't around and you didn't have a Steve Rifkin and you didn't have a you didn't have an actual label that was willing to support artistic freedom like Loud was willing to do with Dead Prez, or even if you get dropped by your label because your message is too anti-establishment, it's too anti-capitalist, it's too self-empowerment. It's to the point like, yo, the platforms are now where you can go to your people now and crowdfund your album and be like, yo, we're going to give you the platform. We're going to give you our platform based on your dollars, and we'll give you the music that you want direct to you with no middleman in between it. Right. So it's almost like you would have to go that route now, as opposed to back then when you had to go through a label to get music done, unless you were somebody like a Master P or even a Cash Money, or as I will mention, even in one of our later subjects, a DJ Screw being able to do things hand to mouth, hand to hand.
Right. Yeah. Like, I mean, I know that, like the platforms. I mean, I guess that would be one thing that goes in their favor. Like, you can release it like on a SoundCloud or YouTube and things like that, or just like on MP3. But yeah, I mean, as far as like it going through that same channel, as far as like the establishment, I don't think it would come out.
Nah, no way.
Because like for example, you still have artists that are on labels, but they're still large. I mean, not even so much in hip hop, but just like look at somebody like a Beyonce or a Sam Seed, or I might say his name wrong, or Adele or somebody like that. Like, they're big selling artists, but still go through the channels of labels. I just couldn't see Dead Prez even going through that like on a smaller scale. So if they came out now, like it would definitely have to go through like a SoundCloud or a YouTube, maybe even Spotify or whatever like that. So I mean, just like for their message, I mean, I guess it was a good thing they did come out when they came out. You know what I mean? Like, because it would definitely be almost like you trying to like sling that rock with them.
Exactly.
Album, so
you gotta and they want to put you in jail for it, man, or try to silence you. The themes on this album, when they talk about things, when, like we said, you see things that the Panthers talked about, things that Marcus Garvey talked about, Malcolm X talked about. It's amazing that there was one of the interviews I heard with Dead Prez a little bit later. They said, all right, it's enough talking about change. Is we have to act to be able to do something, and taking those steps. It's sort of like in the movie Malcolm X, when Malcolm was talking to the black people coming out of the church, and he was talking to that dude. He said, you in there talking about the hereafter, brother, but the hereafter is here and now. The hereafter is right here and now. And that's exactly the same thing that they're talking about now.
That's crazy. I was just watching Malcolm X the other night too.
Yeah, it's still prevalent even to this day, man. And just as to talk about, Dead Prez, this album has gone through the ringer as far as its impact, even though not largely commercially, because they weren't commercially successful as a group. But I think their intent was never to be successful commercially as a group. It was more about the message and the message within the music more so than anything else. So there was actually a interview that took place with Stick of Dead Prez. He was on 107.9 with B-High. This is actually almost about 4 years ago. He had an article. He was basically talking about Let's Get Free, and he was breaking down basically what the process was like to record that album, what their mentality was, and going into making that album. And pretty much these are his words from the man himself.
Oh man, it was like I said, it was a lot of years. That one, the first album that you make, it be your whole life. You know what I mean? So. Our goals with that was to create our own sound, you know what I mean, to the soundscape, where we come from, our tempo, our pace. Right. At that time, a lot of stuff was the club, the shiny suit or whatever, and we enjoyed that, but our space was something slightly different, what I mean? So we wanted to have an album that we felt like was well-rounded as far as our lifestyle. And, so there's stuff about, education and, training and diet and, psychology and, what I mean, the dope game and just everything that was, the holistic picture. A lot of times people tell you about the dope game, but they don't tell you the whole picture.
Exactly.
Or they tell you about the party, but they don't tell you the whole when you wake up tomorrow. You know what I mean? And now it's back to work. You know what I mean? So we just wanted to be holistic,
Sounds like propaganda, man. Still relevant to this day, though. And see, that's one thing about it. When you get in there and you make that honest music, a lot of time it's also timeless music.
Yeah.
What was it that made y'all say, you know what? How do you feel with some of that music still being relevant today when you spoke about it back then and it's still going on today?
Yeah, man. I don't take no credit for that because it was timeless. as we was learning it and speaking, you know, our condition as people been what it's been for the longest, man. So the fact that it's just, if more of us spoke about the real, it'll seem like everybody's prophetic.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But we cause life's so real, a lot of times we use our art to escape. You know what I mean? We don't want to hear about the bills and all that. When we out, we trying to get away from that.
Exactly.
So we create fantasy music, you know, to help us kind of cope.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And that's cool, you know, but sometimes, you know, you got to Curtis Mayfield that thing.
And there you have it. So he talks about the reality in their music and what the reality is for black people and for our society. And that was even back then 20 years ago.
Right.
And it's the same exact thing now. He talks about fantasy music and how it was like, no, we had to make sure that we projected the reality, what the reality is. We talked about the hereafter is here and now. The hereafter is right here and now. And to talk about a lot of the things that they done, it foreshadowed what they did. Some of the things they do, like they had this RBG Fit Club, Stick and M1 are both really into health. You hear a lot about that on the album.
Yeah, like the Be Healthy track.
Be healthy, about not eating good food and everything else. They're very active when it comes to talking about the type of things that happen with this food, stuff being genetically modified and growth hormones and making sure that you eat. And I've seen videos of these brothers getting down in the gym and they getting down like they boxing, you know what I'm saying? Like they preparing. And so it's really important you keep hearing these messages and these messages keep playing on as time goes on.
Right, yeah, and it definitely wasn't on the radar back in 2000 for me, like, you know what I mean, as far as like the be healthy. I mean, you know, being in college, I mean, you know what I'm saying, you ain't exactly eating the healthiest of food, like in between classes and everything like that. Ramen noodles, that was a delicacy, so you know what I mean?
And you don't realize the stuff that's in that thing, man. If you keep having a steady diet of that, could damage you, man.
Right, like plus like back then, oh my God, if you had the shrimp joint, like you were living good.
And not just that, man, but carryouts and places you have these food deserts. We know about it living in growing up Prince George's County and in DC, these food deserts that are in our areas that we don't have the access to the healthy type of food. It's just another type of thing that you can point to this album, how it was, you know, ahead of its time and critical when it talks about the thought process of going through life. But we'll sort of get now into the album, some of the things you liked and some of the things that you appreciate more so now than then. So I just, you know, kind of throw it back to you, Jay, and just a few of the tracks that your favorites on here and the stuff probably you appreciate more now, more so than then.
One of the things like I appreciated was like, well, I guess like something I came to know about his album. I didn't know Lord Jamar was a producer, you know what I'm saying? So when I looked at him on the credits, I was like, oh snap, like, you know, and I didn't know he was so important as far as I'm getting signed and getting a deal. Matter of fact, that the Happiness track, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm making this comment from like a producer standpoint, like how you had that Mary J. Blige Be Happy, that riff she did.
Yeah. See, you caught that too, yeah. Game peep game, indeed.
You know what I'm saying? And then like, of course, the joint hip hop, Police State, Propaganda, Be Healthy, they schools, and definitely when I felt could have been longer. I mean, I guess it's one of the things, I don't want to say a down thing, but I wish the track could have been longer. Discipline. Man, like I could probably listen to that like every day, like now, just waking up, you know, just be able to focus on goals and
focus on them,
you know what I'm saying, like pretty much like how discipline makes life easier, you know what I mean? Like I'm in more of a space now, being older, as far as like being able to like process that. So, you know what I mean, like just the whole album, it really was just like when you apply to like today, and like if you were in your 30s or of a more, hey, for lack of a better term, advanced mindset, like it's almost like just like a fully loaded magazine, just blasting like just knowledge at you. You know what I mean? I hate to use that type of metaphor, but like the police brutality, basically just taking care of your health, going against propaganda, and basically like talking about the school system, just like, and hate to piss anybody off with this one, but just like going against organized religion as well, like as a tool which has held black people down since they've gotten it for like the past 450 years or however. So
speak on it.
You know what I mean? So like, and that's not against religion, but organized religion, there's a difference, like, you know, like which a lot of black people swear by up and down today. So and basically, I mean, just and that was another thing I appreciated about them, like not being afraid rather to speak on that, because like, you know, even back then I think people would have tiptoed around it. You know, for them to put that out there, I think that made them ahead of their time too, because honestly, I mean, there's a lot more freedom now as far as people speaking on it, but even now I think people still shied away from it, at least to the degree in which they did it. So like, so I mean, those are some of the things I just liked about the album. yeah, I couldn't really find anything as far as like that I didn't like about the album.
Yeah.
I mean, even like the intro, like we were talking about the wolf and like making that metaphor about like, you know, like licking the blood and like how you're killing yourself off, how we're killing ourselves off as far as like, you think you're doing good, but like it's causing this much damage and eventually you're going to end up taking yourself out, you know what I'm saying, before you even have an opportunity to do anything. So
yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that thing about organized religion, that line by M1 and Propaganda where in the chorus it says that God was something that was created by man, you know, to instill fear.
Right.
And there's a lot. And if you talk about a lot of these either religion or anti-organized religion folks, you'll hear a similar type of message by people is that they'll say that this was a tool in order to be able to control and to instill fear. So it is interesting that they bring this up, man. And like I said, this woke me up a lot. It woke a lot of people up. And then at 18, you start to get to think about this, and coupling that with the fact that it was at such a critical time when I was in a black college and I was starting to unlearn all the things that I'd learned in elementary school. So you're definitely right. As far as what I liked, I mean, They Schools, of course, is a track that kind of like, yo, this is like the thing I'm starting to talk about. Like you get and you start unlearning things. One of the things right here. Hip hop, of course, is a highlight of a track. Police State, considering the times that we're in right now. Right. It still resonates even 20 years later, especially now over the last, at least I would say from the last election cycle and heading into now, some of the things that have happened between the police and different in our communities. Mind sex, though. This is one thing that I think a lot of people sort of take this track and they sort of skip over it. But I think it's a nice change up in between the messages that are woven into this album. Mind sex to me is a really, really nice, because it's a good message. It's like, yo, I'm trying to have a stimulating conversation with you. Right. You know, we ain't got to get to it right now. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to sit on the bed, puff a L, play some chess, talk about some things, you know. Now, they do continue to say is, hey, I'm not trying to say I'm not trying to fuck because I am. But we ain't got to do that right now.
Right. And see, that was other track I didn't even jot down as far as what I like. I mean, because I do remember when the drink came out, video was dope, song was dope.
Yeah, the video was dope.
Yeah, like just the imagery and all like that. Like, did Hype Williams do that one? Or?
I think Hype Williams did do that one.
Okay.
Yeah. If not, then I'll find out who did it. But I think Hype did do that one, though. Yeah.
Yeah, so like going back to the message, like, I mean, it just was different than what was coming out at that time as far as like, you know, like all like songs back then was like focused on, you know what I'm saying, like smashing a chick or whatever like that. Yeah. So they again kind of like, you know what I'm saying, went left as far as, you know, still trying to do that, but I ain't rushing it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you kind of, it's kind of like a low key way, honestly, like kind of like for the fellas, like separate yourself from the lames out there. You
Indeed.
know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, nah, I ain't just trying to get in your panties, mama. Let's sit down and talk. Like, let's vibe for a quick second.
Right. And like, I mean, and if, assume, of course, this is a woman you really into and everything like that. That's really how you separate yourself from the lames and put a disclaimer out there. Don't do it by talking, do it by showing.
Exactly.
So like, and of course, you know what I'm saying, you can spark your blunt or whatever like that. Ain't nobody anti-weed or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have your herbal stimulation, if you will.
Indeed.
And then, like, you know what I'm saying, you vibe, and then that obviously will probably lead to y'all getting it in. I mean, plus, I mean, with sex being 80% mental, which is, I think, another thing they didn't come out and say that, but I mean,
it's inferred, though.
Yeah, it's inferred. Yeah, so like, I mean, that's just another thing. I mean, and this goes back to the point, like, you know, it's heavy stuff. Like, even with that track, like, if you're not mentally prepared to hear that, it's going to go over your head. I mean,
exactly.
Like, so I forgot about Jot now.
Yeah, mind sex. Yeah, no doubt, definitely. We Want Freedom, which to me, I think the storytelling in a couple of these tracks, man, A1 when it comes to the stories that you hear and songs like We Want Freedom, and then also stories that you hear in Animal and Man, which I'll get to that too. Yeah. That's another one in here. That was and dope. The parallels that they drew to this for George Orwell's Animal Farm. Yeah. And
I was I was like, whoa.
It sounded familiar, doesn't it? Yeah. But the ending is a little bit different than what they had at Animal Farm. Be healthy, and of course the vocals at the end of that, when you talk about with Prodigy, you're a Prodigy's voice on there at the end, and it's interesting because after Prodigy received his sickle cell diagnosis, right, he spoke openly in a few interviews about him eating better and wanting to take better part of his body, and though while some of the physical limitations of him being able to stay in shape, he was saying like he was being very careful about the things that he was putting into his body because he knew that he had limitations based on the disease. And that was kind of reigned, being as the fact the Prodigy's not here anymore.
Right.
You know, that you kind of sit back and think about. Happiness to me, I think, is a cool ass track. And it's another one of those songs that breaks up the message. It's another change up, you know, talking about good times, about summertime, puffing some L's, sitting outside joking, got the, you know, Guinness in the refrigerator on chill, you know.
I'm saying, like, I might gotta put it on my my playlist as far as the summertime.
Oh yeah, indeed.
I clearly like skipped over that one. So.
Nah, yeah, Happiness is definitely another good one. Animal and Man, like I said, the imagery with that and the storytelling in that is ill. I almost wanted, if I do have a low point in this, I almost wanted there to be a rhyme on You'll Find a Way.
Yeah.
Because that was a nice instrumental. You could hear the live instruments in that, the trumpet and the brass, then that piano. It's almost like I wanted a rhyme to be on that track.
Right. I
you know?
Yeah, I was listening to it like, hey, man, somebody gonna drop some bars? Like, what's good, man? Like,
yeah, exactly. Propaganda, of course, we talk about the message in that. And to me, The Pistol is a jarring track because it's kind of a little bit different than the other tracks that are on there as far as the things they're talking about. And to me, one of the illest verses on this whole thing is Maintained from Illegal Tendencies. The very last verse you hear on this album is his verse.
Right, and the way the track just stops.
ended, and that was the end of the album.
Right.
You know, so no lowlights on this for me, man. To me, I was reading a review about this. It was actually, I believe this was done by Pop Music Matters. They were talking about, it was actually, Pop Matters Music, excuse me. And they were talking about how there's nothing about the production that stands out, in their opinion. Nothing about the production that stands out. And to me, I can agree with that. But I do think the production on this is solid.
Yeah.
It's solid, and I think it fits exactly what it is that they needed in order to convey the messages they wanted to convey.
Right. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, you really had to like put any star power behind the production. I mean, the tracks, you know what I'm saying, they serve their purpose. Like, I don't really think this is one of those albums where you wanted the beat to outshine the MC. You know what I mean? Like, because like a lot of people, like, and no disrespect to this man, like, but you don't. There was no need for like a Polo the Don type beat on. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, love Polo the Don's a producer, but like, I think he has like an issue as far as like, you know, finding MCs that can really match the intensity of his beats, and I just don't think that type of energy was needed for here. I think, you know, like, while they weren't revolutionary beats, excuse the phrase, but they served their purpose. So I mean, I don't really think it was a need to even point that out, to be honest. So
but it's, to me, the beats serve their purpose. They're a perfect fit with what was being said on the album, and they're solid. They're dope. I mean, they're like, yo, these are beats that I could actually see other people rapping on other than just them.
Right.
You know, and considering the fact that they handle the majority of the production along with Head Rush and along with Lord Jamar and even Kanye West, but they did have some instrumentalists on here. Some musicians play on this album. Melvin Gibbs, Lord J. Seaton Fenn, Joshua. Also, they had Mark Batson on the keyboards. So there were some musicians that played live instruments, and I think there are at least on a few of these songs where it's mostly live instrumentation and not traditional hip-hop production through a DAW or through a machine such as an SP or an ASR or MPC, which is a nice little change up. So those are the things on there. So as far as we get into notable quotables, there's a lot of interesting and memorable things on here, but there was a notable quotable that I had. And also, to get to that, it is actually the first verse, or actually the first couple of verses. We want freedom. The first verse: imagine having no running water to drink. Chemicals contaminate the pipes leading to your sink. Just think, if the grocery stores close their doors and they saturate the streets with tanks and start martial law, would you be ready for civil war? Could you take the life of somebody you know or have feelings for? If necessary, I got cousins in the military, but as far as I'm concerned, they died when they registered. And then the second part of this comes in, is like, this world is oh so cold. I think about my ancestors being sold. It makes me want to break the mold. Fuck the gold in the party. Train yourself, clean your shoddy. Tell me what you're going to do, get free. We need more than MCs. We need Hueys and revolutionaries. The niggas on the streets today is kind of scary. The smell around my way ain't roses or strawberries. In fact, it's kind of poisonous, bringing out the boy in us. But I'm going to stand up on my own like a man do. Dominate the land and make wealth like Fu Manchu. So just things like that.
Yeah,
you know,
it was just, the album was just chock full of them.
Yeah, chemicals contaminate the pipes leading to your sink.
Right.
We talked about like this with Mos Def and New World Order, and now we talking about Flint and the problems that we have. There was even a story that came out I think it was last week somewhere here in Maryland, that there was a higher concentration of lead and contaminants in the drinking water in one of these, like in somewhere nearby. Still the same thing, man. It's 2020 and people still in a country like America don't have clean water to drink, man.
No sense, man. That's a whole different podcast right there.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if you had any notable quotes that you wanted to go off of.
Yeah, I had one from they school. So yeah, this is like towards the end of the first verse. It was like, in the hallways, the popo was always present. Searching through niggas' possessions, looking for dope and weapons, get your lessons. That's why my moms kept stressing. I tried to pay attention, but the class wasn't interesting. They seemed to only glorify the Europeans, claiming Africans was only 3/5 a human being. Mm-hmm. So like,
yeah, the 3/5 principle. Yeah,
I still remember that lesson in high school.
Yeah,
like,
man. Yeah, it's crazy, and the album is littered with different gems just like that, and it goes back to the whole thing about the mainstream message that nowadays you may not, like you said, with a major label, like now that especially, even since then, labels have now consolidated. So it's only a few major ones out there. So, and we know that how you talk about the labels and the media companies now, everything is controlled by a certain amount of companies. Mm-hmm. They don't want this type of message getting out there to the masses, man. That's fuel to the fire of a fire that can burn out of control to burn this country down. Mm-hmm. So, really, really good work on here, man, by both Stick and M1. And this was just their debut album. There was a lot of different other albums they had. There's at least 3 different albums and a lot of different mixtapes, including the Turn Off the Radio series that they had, mixtape volume 1, 2, and then also volume 3. There's 4 actually Turn Off the Radios. And then the RBG, Revolutionary but Gangster, Information Age. Mm-hmm. And hearing another album interview by Dead Prez, they were saying that if they were to do Let's Get Free now, and this was like maybe a few years ago, they said that album would sound like Information Age. So this definitely wasn't something for the masses, and I think this is probably one of the most interesting conversations we can have about it. Just go into the test, see whether it stands the test of time. Now, is it a certified classic? Is it borderline? Is it just in its time? I will say this to preface this from my perspective. Mainstream-wise, this is probably not going to be considered a classic.
Right.
But I think for the heads, I'm willing to put this in the category that this is a borderline classic to me. And I think that, like you said, it's not flashy, but, like they were saying, hey, like Stick was saying, when it comes to this, everything was more so in 2000 was about flashy, was bling bling. Mm-hmm. It was starting to go through a transition in hip hop. So nothing about this album was flashy, but it's solid. And therefore, it's things that you can sort of listen to. And even now, 20 years later, I went through it and I didn't just go, oh, I'm skipping this song because I don't feel like listening to it. So it's good, quality, solid music. So mainstream wise, I don't think it could be considered a classic, but I consider it to be borderline as well, a borderline classic. And I think it's right there where even now we talking about 10, 20 years from now, we could point to the lessons and things that are being done on this album. And it could be like, damn, this is probably still prevalent 40 years after it came out.
I mean, God forbid. I would hope we make some
I hope
changes.
not. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope we make some changes by then. But yeah, as far as for me, I mean, I would agree. I don't think it'd be a mainstream, class by mainstream standards. So out of those categories, I would say borderline classic, but I would say among the heads in that circle that, to appreciate this type of hip hop, I would think they would regard it as a classic.
Yeah.
But just off the scale of like, classic, borderline, or classic for its time, I would say borderline because I mean, it's like right there. I mean,
there.
So I mean, even if you take out of context of the production and everything, I mean, the potential controversy behind it, because it's like, which I don't want to say it was successfully kept at bay, but it didn't like resonate the same way like when you think about other controversial albums, like say Ice-T's Cop Killer or pretty much like Doggy Style or The Chronic or something like that. It didn't get that level of controversy. I mean, honestly, I think had it gotten to that point, it would have probably been bigger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like it wasn't just like on some gangster. It wasn't on a gangster tip. Like it was on a black people wake the hell up type tip, and
exactly.
like that really gets like mainstream America like really riled up and ruffles their feathers. So it didn't get to that point. So yeah, out of that, I would say borderline classic.
Yeah, and they even said that they, on the African, I'm an African. They said that their music was somewhere between NWA and Public Enemy. And that's probably a good way to explain. They were kind of like right in between that NWA, fuck the police, you know, and Public Enemy, fight the power.
And that's kind of funny because like I almost see them. I meant to say this earlier. I kind of see them as almost like an extension of Public Enemy, but with a bit of a harder edge.
Exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I kind of wish like maybe, and obviously this label's defunct now, but maybe they had like Raucus backing them up. Like maybe something more could have came over it, but.
Yeah,
I think it would fit right in there.
Yeah, I think they would have fit in Raucus. As a matter of fact, on Lyricist Lounge Volume 2, they have a song called Sharpshooters with Talib Kweli, which is a banger of a track. That Sharpshooters track with Talib Kweli. It also, I think they're sort of a shoot off also of Poor Righteous Teachers and X-Clan, because it's right there with that Pan-African message, and you got the same type of content from X-Clan and from Poor Righteous Teachers as well. So there it is. We both think it's a borderline classic. Dead Prez, Let's Get Free. Go out there and listen to it, especially, man, if you think about the issues of today. It definitely resonates today amongst all the issues that we have in society, particular black people and communities of color and poor communities. Listen to it, man, and re-stimulate your mind a little bit to be able to go through some of the things that you go through, man. I think you can appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm serious. Like, if you're even remotely conscious of things that have been going on, like, listen to the album and tell me if you're not gonna have like a little disco mix of like Ferguson, Freddie Gray, you know, Flint, like just everything that's gone on. Even with our current leadership in this country. I mean, it's really going to spark something in your mind as far as like, you know, something needs to be done, things need to change.
Indeed, yeah, they do, and it's still relevant even to this day. And Dead Prez is still out there doing their thing to this day. So shout out to them. That is going to wrap up yet another edition of The Vault. Please make sure you check us out on our host, Podbean, vaultcmr.podbean.com. You can also download, stream, and subscribe to The Vault CMR. Check out all of our social media sites for our link tree. The link tree has all of our streaming sites and also all of our social media links. You can check us out on Instagram, Vault CMR Podcast, and you can also get me, B. Cox, on Instagram at It's Lesson. That's at ITS Lesson. And you can catch us on Twitter at Vault Classic, and on Facebook and YouTube, you can get us on the Vault Classic Music Reviews. Search us and you can find us there. Make sure you subscribe and like the fan pages. Always want to make sure that I give my props to all the listeners out there, everyone worldwide. Let me give a quick shout out to my listeners everywhere across the United States, specifically in California, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut. We've seen some great numbers from y'all this week. Also Georgia. Want to give a shout out to all the listeners in Canada, UK, big up to the UK, big up to the Netherlands, Australia, great numbers there. Also want to give a shout out to all the listeners in France, also in Brazil, Mexico, Costa Rica. Big numbers that we've seen from all of y'all this week. Australia, big ups to Australia, to the Lounge Down Under. Y'all are making big noise and the Vault is popping there. Keep spreading the word and get the word out there, man. We are worldwide and we appreciate all the love we get from y'all. So please keep spreading the word. Tell a friend, and if you have that friend, make sure that friend tells a friend as well. Want to thank my man J.O. for coming through and co-piloting this ship for me. Once again, my brother, always appreciate you. We want to remind you to keep your headphones on and your music loud, but not too loud. And as we close, we like to remind everyone to dream big, because dreams are the basis for creation. Always create, motivate, and elevate, because you were never destined to stay stationary in this life. And on that note, we say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening and coming into The Vault. Please subscribe and follow us on Facebook at IV Creative and Instagram at IVECRE8.